It began with a signal so faint that the machines on Titan almost missed it. The human monitoring station there, orbiting the orange skies of Saturn's largest moon, was used to picking up static from distant stars, echoes of dying comets, and the faint hum of cosmic radiation. But this signal was different. It carried rhythm, a pattern, something intelligent. The AI filters identified it as alien, but buried inside were strange data bursts, irregular and full of distress tones. The operators didn't know it yet, but those signals carried a horrifying message. When the data reached Earth, decoding specialists worked through the night. They replayed the signal over and over, watching as their translation systems slowly pieced together the meaning. Then silence fell across the room. The translated words appeared on the screen, glowing faintly. "They took your children." Everyone stared, unable to speak. For a long moment, no one moved. Then a whisper broke the quiet. "Whose children?" The system confirmed it. Human children. The message came from deep space, far beyond the borders of known Federation territory, near a region humans hadn't fully explored. The coordinates pointed to a small, remote human research outpost. The colony had gone dark weeks ago, and most people assumed it was a communications failure. Now they realized it was something much worse. Within hours, emergency meetings were called across all human stations. News networks picked up the story, spreading it across every city and colony. Families froze in fear, watching the broadcasts. They showed the faces of missing children from the research base, laughing, smiling, unaware of the fate that had befallen them. The world held its breath. Intelligence reports soon revealed who was responsible, a species called the Valtari. They were an old civilization, known for their cold logic and scientific arrogance. Humans had met them before during peaceful trade conferences, but contact was rare and uneasy. The Valtari considered most younger species, especially humans, too emotional, too unpredictable. But no one believed they were capable of something so cruel. According to intercepted data, the Valtari had raided the outpost and captured several of the human children for study. The word itself was enough to make every human who heard it tremble with anger. On Earth, governments tried to remain calm, but public outrage spread like wildfire. People gathered in front of government buildings demanding action. Parents cried on live broadcasts, pleading for help. "Bring them back," they said again and again. The human spirit, often divided by politics and distance, united in grief and fury. It didn't matter if someone lived on Earth, Mars, or the outer colonies. Every person understood one thing clearly. No one touches human children and walks away unpunished. At the Human Federation command, the Situation Room buzzed with activity. Commanders reviewed the last transmission from the outpost, showing broken corridors and abandoned toys floating in zero gravity. No bodies, no survivors, only silence. "We don't have confirmation they're alive," one analyst said quietly. "We don't have confirmation they're dead either," replied another. The commander at the table looked up, his voice steady but cold. "Then we'll find out ourselves." The decision came swiftly. A rescue fleet would be prepared. Not for war, not yet, but for retrieval and justice. Massive ships docked in orbit were rearmed, fueled and staffed with the most skilled personnel available. Every volunteer knew what was at stake. Some were parents themselves. Others had lost family in past conflicts. There was no shortage of willing hands. The news spread through the ranks faster than any order could. They weren't just going out there as soldiers, they were going as protectors. Back on Earth, civilians watched from their screens as the fleet prepared for departure. Families gathered in city squares, lighting candles and sending messages to the stars. Children drew pictures of spaceships with banners that read, "Bring them home." It wasn't just about revenge, it was about love, about a promise humans made to one another. No one gets left behind. As the fleet left orbit, silence filled every control room. The ships moved like shadows against the stars, their engines burning a soft blue light. In that quiet, something changed across humanity. They were not only explorers and builders anymore, they were guardians. Every mother and father watching knew it. Even those who had never held a child felt the weight of the mission. Somewhere out there, frightened children were waiting, maybe crying, maybe hoping someone would come. Humanity was answering that hope. Meanwhile, deep in Valtari territory, the aliens who had committed the act didn't fully grasp what they had done. They saw it as a simple scientific experiment, analyzing the resilience of human biology. To them, the children were specimens. They didn't understand the concept of innocence or childhood the way humans did. Their society valued logic above emotion, progress above empathy. But that lack of understanding would soon destroy them. Back on the flagship of the rescue fleet, the crew trained relentlessly during the journey. Every scenario was simulated, every approach practiced. They studied Valtari communication codes, defense structures, and planetary maps. The mission wasn't about aggression, it was about speed, precision, and protection. But deep down, everyone knew if the Valtari resisted, humanity would not hesitate. Even across allied alien species, whispers began to spread. The story of the captured human children traveled through trade routes and diplomatic channels. Other species who had seen humanity's strength before warned their people quietly, "The humans will not let this go." Those who understood human nature, those who had fought beside them, knew what was coming. Humanity was terrifying not because of their weapons, but because of their hearts. When they loved fiercely. When they protected, they did so with everything they had. In the days that followed, the distress signal was replayed across every station. Some said it sounded like a child's voice crying through the static. Whether that was true or not, no one could be sure. But the idea haunted them. It pushed the engineers to work longer shifts, the soldiers to train harder, and the pilots to memorize every possible escape route. As the fleet neared Valtari space, tension grew. The commanders didn't know what awaited them. Some hoped the Valtari would surrender peacefully once confronted. Others doubted it. Still, the fleet pressed on, united by a simple promise: "We will bring them home." The galaxy watched. Billions of beings who had once dismissed humans as fragile creatures now waited in silence. They had seen humans laugh, cry, love, and build. But soon they would see another side of them, the side that rose when their young were in danger. Even alien diplomats whispered prayers for the Valtari, knowing what kind of storm was about to reach them. In the final hours before the fleet's arrival, the commander of the Resolute Dawn stood before a holographic screen, showing the faces of the missing children. The room was quiet except for the hum of the ship. He spoke softly, almost to himself, but his words echoed through the crew. "They think we're too emotional. They're right. That's why we'll win." No one on board slept that night. Across every deck, soldiers checked their weapons, pilots ran diagnostics, and medics prepared rescue bays. Even the AI system seemed more alert than usual. Somewhere beyond the stars, the Valtari continued their work, unaware that an entire species was moving toward them, not with greed or conquest, but with righteous fury born from love. And as the ships crossed the final stretch of space, humanity remembered every lesson it had learned through pain and survival. They had endured wars, loss, and darkness, but nothing compared to this. The thought of frightened children waiting in alien cages was unbearable. No power in the universe could stop them now. Back on Earth, the night sky looked the same, but people could almost feel the weight of what was happening out there. In classrooms, teachers told their students that brave men and women were among the stars, bringing the little ones home. In homes, parents held their own children closer. In silence, humanity prayed not for victory but for rescue. The signal that started it all still played faintly in the archives, a soft, broken message drifting through endless space. It had awakened something deep within humanity, something ancient and unbreakable. The universe had seen many civilizations rise and fall, but it had never seen the power of a species that fought not for domination, but for love. The fleet pressed on through the darkness, engines roaring like distant thunder. They carried no flags of conquest, no songs of war, only one promise whispered through every heart aboard: "We are coming for you." The fleet that was sent to find the missing children became the center of attention across all human colonies. Everyone followed its journey through live updates, news streams, and public broadcasts. No one could think of anything else. It wasn't just another space operation. It was something deeply personal for every human being. They weren't sending soldiers to fight for land or power. They were sending them to bring home their children. That simple fact gave the mission a weight that could be felt even from light years away. The fleet moved through deep space like a silent storm. Hundreds of ships, large and small, traveled in perfect formation. Every one of them had a clear purpose. On board the main flagship, the Resolute Dawn, the air was heavy with focus. Engineers monitored the engines, Pilots checked their flight paths and communication officers stayed connected with the rest of the fleet. The crew nervous, they were determined. Everyone knew what was at stake. They weren't just part of a mission, they were part of a promise. Before leaving Earth, they had received a single message from the families of the missing children. It was short, but it stayed in everyone's minds. Bring them home. No matter what. That sentence became the fleet's heartbeat. Some soldiers carried recordings of their own children on their wrist displays. Others wore small photos inside their suits. It reminded them why they were there, to protect the future of their kind. Back on Earth, millions watched the fleet's progress on massive screens in cities and towns. People stood shoulder to shoulder, watching the glowing dots move slowly toward the outer edges of human-controlled space. The news anchors spoke softly, careful not to spread fear but unable to hide the tension in their voices. Commentators discussed what the Valtari might do, but most avoided guessing. Everyone knew the truth. No matter how advanced or proud the Valtari were, they had made a terrible mistake. In the following days, messages began arriving from human allies, other alien civilizations that had once fought beside humanity or traded with them. Many of them expressed shock. One message from an old ally said, "If the Valtari truly have your children, we will not stand in their defense." That message alone made the entire command room fall silent. It meant the galaxy understood something the Valtari did not. Humans would never let this go quietly. Inside the Resolute Dawn, the officers gathered in the strategy room, a circular chamber filled with holographic displays of the Valtari star system. The planets glowed blue and gold in the air above the table, rotating slowly. The commanders studied every orbit, every moon, and every known base. "They will expect a fight," one officer said. The commander shook his head. "Let them expect. We're not here for war. We're here to bring our people home." Those words settled over the crew like a calm flame, burning steady and strong. But deep down, everyone knew what could happen if the Valtari resisted. They had seen what happened in the past when humanity's patience was tested. Humans never started wars, but once provoked, they never backed down. The fleet's weapons stayed ready, but their mission remained clear. Rescue first, fight only if forced. As the fleet drew closer to Valtari space, they began picking up transmissions, scrambled, broken, full of static. It sounded like distant conversations between Valtari ships. Most of it was routine traffic, but a few messages stood out. Phrases like "prepare the research sites" and "the humans are coming" appeared again and again. It was clear that the Valtari knew what was happening. They were scared, though they would never admit it publicly. In one of the fleet's smaller ships, a young technician listened closely to the alien signals. She filtered through hours of noise until one faint human voice came through, a child's voice. It was weak and unclear, but everyone who heard it stopped what they were doing. The words were hard to make out, but it sounded like, "Please, someone, help." That small, broken cry filled the command deck with silence. Then came action. Orders flew across the channels. The fleet increased its speed. The mission was no longer just urgent, it was personal. On the Valtari homeworld, the ruling council gathered in panic. The chamber was filled with tall, shimmering figures, their skin reflecting the glow of data screens. They argued endlessly, blaming each other for what had happened. "The humans are emotional," one of them said. "They will forgive if we explain." But another replied coldly, "No, they won't. You don't understand them." Still, they refused to release the children. They believed their advanced technology would protect them. They didn't realize they had underestimated something far stronger than technology, the human will. Meanwhile, the Federation back home began diplomatic efforts, sending official warnings to the Valtari Council. "Return the children safely," the message said. "Do not test us." The Valtari didn't respond. That silence was the final mistake. Humanity's patience was not infinite, and every second of delay only deepened their resolve. On the Resolute Dawn, the crew prepared for possible contact. The soldiers cleaned their gear in silence. The medics stocked emergency supplies, and the engineers ran power checks on every weapon and engine. No one spoke loudly. The air was filled with quiet determination. Each person knew what might happen next. They were heading into unknown territory where one wrong move could start a war. As they approached the border of Valtari space, the stars seemed to grow brighter. Every sensor showed defensive satellites, patrol ships, and communication relays, proof that the Valtari were preparing for confrontation. Still, the fleet did not change course. The commander's voice came through every ship in calm, steady words. "We are not invaders. We are rescuers. Stay sharp, stay human." Even across alien space, other civilizations watched the unfolding events. The galaxy had seen countless conflicts, but this felt different. It wasn't about territory or greed. It was about love, loyalty, and justice. Some alien leaders spoke quietly to their people, warning them never to make the same mistake the Valtari did. They said, "You can reason with a human about trade or politics, but never harm their young." Inside the fleet, the atmosphere was intense but deeply human. Soldiers told stories about their families to keep each other calm. Engineers joked quietly to hide their nerves. In one ship, a medic played a soft tune from Earth through the speaker system, reminding everyone what they were fighting for. The melody echoed through the halls, a song about home, about safety, about the simple promise that love always finds a way. Days passed like this, filled with both silence and preparation. Every moment brought them closer to confrontation. The closer they got, the clearer it became that this was not a battle between two species. It was a clash between empathy and arrogance. The Valtari believed knowledge and logic ruled the universe. Humans believed something else, that compassion was the most powerful force of all. When the fleet finally reached the edge of Valtari-controlled space, they sent one final message across all channels. It was short, clear, and impossible to ignore. "Release the children, every one of them. You have 72 hours." Then they waited. For a while there was no answer. Hours turned into days. Some hoped for a peaceful reply. Others knew better. On the final day of waiting, the commander stood by the viewing window looking out at the endless stars. "They still haven't responded," one officer said quietly. The commander nodded slowly. "Then they've chosen their path," he said. His voice was calm, but his eyes burned with purpose. He wasn't angry, he was focused. He knew what had to be done. Back on Earth, people stayed awake through the night, watching live updates, whispering prayers for peace but preparing their hearts for war. The galaxy held its breath. Somewhere in the darkness, human ships glowed faintly, their engines ready. The countdown had begun. Every man and woman aboard the fleet felt the same thought running through their minds. We warned them. Now we go get our children. And as the final hour approached, a strange calm settled over everyone. They weren't afraid anymore. The mission had become something bigger than themselves. It was no longer just about a few missing children. It was about proving to the universe that humanity's greatest strength wasn't power, but heart. Far away in the Valtari system, the atmosphere inside their Grand Council chamber was thick with worry. The ruling members sat around a long circular table made of shining crystal, their voices raised in panic and disbelief. Their silver eyes flickered under the dim light as they argued about what to do. The humans had sent a clear message: "Release the children. You have 72 hours. To most of the Valtari, that sounded like an empty threat. They had dealt with other species before, many of them stronger than humans, and those species always hesitated before taking action. The Valtari thought the humans would do the same. But deep down, a few among them feared otherwise. One elder scientist stood up and spoke with a trembling voice. "You do not understand these beings," she said. "They are not like us. They are not ruled by numbers or by calm reason. They are driven by emotion, by something powerful we do not have." The others laughed softly at her words. "Emotion makes them weak," one of the leaders replied. "They will argue among themselves before they ever come here. They will talk until it is too late." But even as he spoke, news was spreading through the council's data channels. News of the massive human fleet moving closer, crossing systems in perfect formation. The Valtari had always believed in control. Their cities floated above clouds, glowing with pale blue light. Every movement in their society followed logic and order. But now that calm order was breaking. Military officers filled the council room, reporting one thing after another. Human warships have crossed into border space. Their signals are everywhere. They are refusing to turn back. The council tried to act confident, but everyone could feel the fear creeping in. The lead chancellor, a tall figure with a voice like cold glass, raised her hand to silence the room. "Send them a message," she said. "Tell them we acted in peace. Tell them we took their children for scientific understanding, not harm." The communication officers nodded and began transmitting their message through the void of space. They thought it would calm the humans. They thought words would work. But by then it was already too late for words. On the Resolute Dawn, the human fleet's flagship, the crew received the Valtari's transmission. The Chancellor's voice came through the speakers, smooth and emotionless. "We mean no hostility," she said. "The human children are in our care. We are studying them to understand your species better. Once we are finished, we will return them unharmed." The words echoed through the command deck. No one spoke for a long time. Then quietly, one officer muttered, "Studying them?" Another whispered, "They don't even see what's wrong with it." The commander stood at the center of the room, his expression unreadable. He leaned forward slightly and said in a low voice, "They call this care? They imprison our children and call it science?" His tone was calm, but everyone in the room could feel the storm behind those words. Without raising his voice, he ordered, "Open all channels. I'll give the response myself." Moments later, across the stars, every Valtari communication network was interrupted. The humans didn't hide behind coded signals, they spoke openly. The commander's voice filled the air of every control room on the Valtari homeworld. "You say you are studying our children," he began, his tone cold and steady. "You say it is for peace, but what you've done is beyond reason. You've taken the innocent and called it progress. You have 72 hours to return them safely. If they are harmed, you will not need to fear war. You will fear what comes after." The message cut off. Silence followed, but it wasn't a peaceful silence. It was the kind that pressed on the chest, heavy and cold. On the Valtari homeworld, the citizens heard the human voice and felt something they hadn't felt in generations: fear. They began whispering in their streets and marketplaces. "The humans are coming. They are not like the others. They fight for their children." Inside the council chamber, panic grew again. "They dare threaten us," one of the generals shouted. "They are a young race. They have no idea what they are up against." Another tried to calm him, but even he could see the truth. The humans weren't bluffing. They never bluffed when it came to their own. Some of the Valtari scientists tried to reason with the council. "We should release the captives," they said. "If what they say is true, their fleet will destroy us." But others refused. "Our defenses are strong. Their ships are many, but ours are superior." Pride blinded them. They still believed their technology would protect them. Meanwhile, deep within one of the Valtari laboratories, the captured human children sat in transparent containment rooms. The scientists around them took notes and ran quiet scans. The children were frightened but unhurt. They didn't understand why they were there. One of the alien assistants hesitated as he looked into the eyes of a small human child. There was something in that gaze that unsettled him, something pure and alive. He whispered to himself, "They are not creatures to study, they are people." But when he tried to tell his superiors, they silenced him. "Do not get emotional," they said. Emotions cloud judgment. Back in space, the human fleet continued its approach. The ships glided through the darkness like silver arrows, their engines humming softly. On board, every crew member prepared for what was to come. Some prayed quietly. Others focused on their instruments, keeping their minds busy. They didn't want to think about what they might find on the Valtari world. Across the galaxy, other civilizations were watching. Some sent private messages to the humans, offering quiet support. Others kept their distance, afraid to be involved. But everyone agreed on one thing: the Valtari had crossed a line that no one else dared cross. As hours turned into days, the Valtari continued debating. Some wanted to surrender. Others wanted to fight. The council meetings stretched through the nights, full of shouting and fear. Their communications were full of contradictions. Some messages called for negotiation, others prepared for battle. Confusion spread through their military. And then something unexpected happened. During one of the late council sessions, an alien ambassador from another species was present. Someone who had worked closely with humans in the past. When he heard the Valtari leaders justify their actions, he couldn't stay silent. He slammed his hand on the table, his voice echoing through the chamber. "You imprisoned human children? Do you even understand what you've done?" The room fell silent. His voice carried not only anger but disbelief. "You think you can reason with them after this? You don't understand what kind of people they are. You think they are monsters, but you will soon learn. They are protectors. When you took their children, You declared war on every human heart in the universe. The Valtari Chancellor's expression darkened. You exaggerate, she said coldly. The ambassador shook his head. No, I've seen them. You should have never touched the innocent. No force in the stars can save you now. The alien left the chamber, but his words stayed behind, echoing in their minds. For the first time, the Valtari began to understand the gravity of their mistake. They hadn't just provoked a nation. They had provoked a species united by love, anger, and the unbreakable bond of family. In the next hours, strange things began happening across the Valtari communication systems. Long-range sensors started picking up energy readings, power signatures from the approaching fleet. The humans weren't hiding. They were coming openly, their presence visible across the stars. The Valtari military scrambled to prepare their defenses. Their ships lined up in orbit, their weapons charged. But deep inside, even their strongest soldiers felt unease. Back on the Resolute Dawn, the commander looked at the display showing the Valtari world ahead. They've had their chance, he said quietly. Now we go and bring them home. His crew nodded. They weren't eager for violence, but they were ready to face whatever waited for them. The countdown had ended. The time for waiting was over. Across the stars, engines flared, shields rose, and hearts beat fast. Humanity's fleet was ready to enter the Valtari system. The galaxy watched in silence, knowing that whatever happened next would be remembered for generations. The humans were not coming for revenge, they were coming for justice. And justice, when born from love, could shake the stars themselves. When the last hour of the deadline passed, space itself seemed to hold its breath. The human fleet had waited patiently, giving the Valtari every chance to do the right thing. 72 hours had come and gone, and still there was no reply, no apology, no surrender, no promise to release the children. That silence was the final answer. On board the flagship Resolute Dawn, every crew member knew what came next. The waiting was over. The commander stood before the main viewing window, looking out into the endless blackness scattered with stars. His reflection shimmered faintly in the glass as the light from the control panels glowed behind him. Around him, the officers stood quietly, watching, waiting for his order. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm but filled with the kind of strength that came from conviction. We gave them a chance, he said softly. Now we act. The order was given and the human fleet moved. Hundreds of ships glided forward, their engines flaring blue against the dark. Drones and scouts went ahead, scanning every inch of space around the Valtari system. Defense grids began to light up on the alien world, their systems coming alive in panic. The Valtari had prepared for war, but their preparations were built on the belief that humans would hesitate. They were wrong. The first human ships reached the edge of the system and deployed signal beacons. Messages were broadcast on every frequency, repeating the same line over and over again. Return the human children. This is your last chance. But again, no answer came. Instead, the Valtari activated their planetary shields. They thought they were safe behind them, hidden under a dome of shimmering energy. What happened next wasn't destruction. It was precision. The human fleet didn't target cities or civilians. Their weapons hit only defense grids and military satellites. Explosions lit up the outer orbit like silent fireworks, each one carefully calculated. The goal wasn't to kill, it was to disable. Humanity didn't want war. They wanted their children back. Across the galaxy, every known species watched the live transmissions with disbelief. No one had ever seen such unity, such controlled power. The human fleet moved like one body with a single purpose. Their ships were fast, sharp, and frighteningly coordinated. Even alien commanders who had once fought humans whispered to their crews, "This is why you never cross them." Inside the Valtari council chamber, panic reached its peak. The leaders shouted at each other, accusing one another of failure. "You said they wouldn't come," one of them cried. "You said they were too emotional to act." Another slammed his hand on the table. "Do something. Stop them!" But there was nothing left to stop. Their outer defense ring had already fallen. On the Resolute Dawn, the human commander sent one more message. This time, it wasn't just for the council. It was broadcast across the entire planet, translated automatically into language. "We are not here to destroy you," his voice said. "We are here for our children. Return them now and we will leave in peace. Continue to resist and we will take them back ourselves." The message played on every screen in every Valtari city. Their citizens stopped in their streets, staring in silence. For the first time, they heard a human voice filled not with hate, but with something far heavier: determination. It wasn't anger that frightened them. It was love turned into strength. Inside one of the laboratories where the captured children were held, the Valtari scientists watched the broadcast too. Some of them trembled. A few stepped back from their instruments, realizing they had gone too far. One of the younger assistants whispered, "We have to let them go." But the lead researcher hesitated. His orders from the council were clear: do not interfere. He looked down at the small human faces watching him, eyes full of confusion and fear. For the first time, he felt shame. Meanwhile, in orbit, human rescue teams prepared for ground entry. Dropships were loaded with supplies, scanners, and emergency gear. Soldiers checked their armor quietly. The plan was simple: go in, locate the children, extract them safely. They didn't want to fight, but they were ready for one if it came. When the dropships launched, they descended like streaks of light through the planet's thin atmosphere. The Valtari defense systems tried to target them, but the human jammers blocked their signals. Within minutes, rescue teams had landed near the research zones identified from intercepted data. Back on the fleet's command deck, live feeds began to pour in. The soldiers moved fast through the Valtari facilities, using non-lethal force wherever possible. They didn't shoot unless attacked. They bypassed guards, disabled drones, and broke through sealed doors with quiet efficiency. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. One rescue team opened a heavy containment door, and there they were, the missing human children. Some were sitting quietly, others were crying softly. When the rescuers entered, the children froze for a moment, then recognized the human uniforms. The youngest among them reached out and whispered, "You came." The rescuers knelt and wrapped the children in thermal blankets, comforting them gently. "You're safe now," one of them said softly. "We're taking you home." It was a moment that every person watching on Earth would remember forever. Back in orbit, the command room filled with relief as confirmation came through. The first group of children had been secured, but the operation wasn't over. There were more facilities scattered across the planet, and time was running short. The Valtari military was regrouping, preparing to launch counterattacks. The commander ordered full extraction operations. Every dropship that went down had one goal: rescue, not revenge. They moved like ghosts through alien terrain, guided by signals from orbit. Some of the Valtari soldiers, seeing that the humans were only targeting labs, began lowering their weapons. Even they started realizing the truth. The humans weren't here to conquer. They were here because they cared. One moment stood out among all others. During an emergency transmission from the Valtari capital, a heated debate broke out between the council and one of their own scientists. The scientist shouted at the leaders, "Stop this madness. Return them. Don't you see what they're doing? They could destroy us, yet they haven't. They're giving us a chance." His voice echoed through the council chamber, shaking everyone present. That was the breaking point. The council finally gave in. They ordered all the remaining human captives to be released immediately. They sent a message to the human fleet, their tone finally humble. "The children are yours. We surrender." When that message reached the Resolute Dawn, the entire bridge fell silent. Then slowly, a wave of relief spread through the crew. The commander didn't smile, he simply nodded. "Good," he said. "Bring them home." Across the next few hours, the remaining children were rescued from various facilities. The human fleet maintained its distance, not striking any further. They didn't want glory or revenge. All they wanted was to make sure every last child was safe. When the last ship left the planet's atmosphere carrying the rescued children, the commander gave one final order. "Transmit this to the Valtari." The message was short and simple. "We do not forget, but we forgive. Learn from this. Never let it happen again." On the Valtari world, silence filled the air as the human ships began to withdraw. Their massive engines glowed faintly before vanishing into the stars. The citizens watched in awe. They had expected destruction, but instead they witnessed mercy. It was a lesson they would never forget. Back on Earth, when the rescue ships finally returned, people filled the streets. They cheered, cried, and prayed in gratitude. The moment the children stepped off the ships, the world stood still. Reporters tried to speak, but words failed them. Parents held their children tightly, unable to stop their tears. The entire galaxy had watched the humans act with courage, compassion, and strength unlike anything seen before. They had proven that humanity's greatest weapon was not fear, but love. And somewhere far away on the now quiet Valtari world, that same alien ambassador who had once shouted in their council chamber stood by his window, watching the sky. He whispered softly, almost to himself, "Now they understand. The humans fight for what they love, and that is something no force in the universe can ever defeat." The aftermath of the rescue operation was both quiet and chaotic at the same time. The children, now free, were brought aboard the human ships, and the medics worked around the clock to ensure that each one was safe, fed, and warm. Some were too frightened to speak. Others whispered stories of their time in captivity, their voices small but full of pain. The human medics listened patiently, offering comfort, soft words, and steady hands. Every small smile, every tear released was a reminder of why they had risked everything to come so far into enemy space. Families on Earth and across the colonies waited anxiously for confirmation. News channels and communication networks were flooded with updates from the fleet, showing live feeds of children being carried down ramps, wrapped in blankets, or being comforted by human rescuers. People wept openly, not just for relief, but for gratitude. Humanity had come together across light years to protect its most vulnerable. Parents hugged their children tighter that night, feeling the depth of what had just been accomplished. Even those without children felt a renewed sense of pride in the species they belonged to. Back on the Resolute Dawn, the commander and his officers began the careful process of reviewing every stage of the mission. They made notes on what went well and what could be improved for the future. Even though the mission had been a success, every crew member knew how close things had come to disaster. The Valtari had been stronger, more technologically advanced, and more unpredictable than anyone had expected. Humanity had relied not on superior weapons but on strategy, unity, and the determination to protect the innocent. That realization left a lasting impression on every person aboard the fleet. In the Valtari system, the ruling council was left in disarray. Their defenses had been breached with surgical precision, and their captive children had been taken. Many of their leaders had been overruled by the commanding human presence, their pride shattered. Some council members attempted to explain their actions, claiming it had been a scientific study, but the younger generations of Valtari, who had observed the events unfold, began to question their own society. They whispered among themselves, asking how a species they considered weak could act with such moral clarity and courage. Across the Valtari cities, civilians began discussing what had happened. Even those who had never interacted with humans before started to understand the true meaning of the operation. They saw humans not just as warriors but as protectors. They saw that the humans' actions were guided not by vengeance but by responsibility, compassion, and unwavering determination. It was a lesson in ethics and morality that many Valtari citizens had never experienced. Meanwhile, back on the human fleet, small celebrations began. The rescued children were given hot meals, clean clothes, and warm beds. Some were too scared to eat at first, so the medics encouraged them gently. Volunteers read stories, played quiet games, and tried to create a sense of normalcy. Every child who smiled was a victory in itself. Even the soldiers who had trained for combat found themselves moved by the simple sight of children laughing again. It reminded them why they had chosen to be part of humanity's protective force. As the fleet moved away from the Valtari system, the commander ordered a full debrief. Every officer, pilot, and medic gathered to discuss the events. They talked about what worked, what needed improvement, and how humanity had demonstrated not just military skill, but moral courage. The lessons were clear. Love and determination could be more powerful than any weapon, and even in the darkest corners of space, humanity's core values could shine through. When the rescued children were finally transported back to Earth and the outer colonies, each one was reunited with their families. There were tears of joy, laughter, and quiet sobs. Communities came together to support the families, offering shelter, food, and love. The emotional impact was immense. Stories of bravery and sacrifice from the fleet spread across every colony, inspiring hope and admiration. Children listened wide-eyed as older members recounted the events, learning for the first time what it truly meant to be part of a species willing to risk everything for its own. Even weeks after the return, the mission's impact continued. The rescued children began therapy programs, both to heal physical wounds and to process emotional trauma. Special attention was given to ensuring that they felt safe and understood, with trained counselors and mentors working with each child. Teachers prepared classes focused on resilience and hope, helping children regain confidence in themselves and in humanity. The larger population watched closely, realizing that while the mission had been dangerous, the true victory was the care, compassion, and support shown afterward. The Valtari system also began to change. The council faced internal reform as younger, more conscientious leaders rose to power, promising to prevent similar mistakes in the future. Citizens debated, learned, and questioned the morality of their actions. Even though the fear of human retaliation had been a motivator, the Valtari began to understand the importance of empathy and respect for life. Schools discussed the lessons openly, and the events were documented for future generations. Humanity's intervention had not only rescued the children, but had also sparked reflection in an entire alien civilization. Across human space, the story of the rescue mission became a symbol of hope. Children drew pictures of the fleet's ships, and parents told their children about the bravery of strangers who had traveled across the galaxy to keep them safe. Even adults who had experienced wars, famines, or natural disasters found inspiration in the events. It reminded them that humanity's strength was not in its weapons or technology alone, but in its courage, compassion, and commitment to one another. In the fleet, crews began to settle back into routine after the intense mission. Pilots flew supply runs, engineers maintained the ships, and medics continued to care for the rescued children. Yet the atmosphere remained different. Every crew member carried the memory of the mission with them, a sense of pride and solemnity that would not fade. They had faced uncertainty, danger, and moral challenges, and they had succeeded not through fear or force, but through care, focus, and unwavering purpose. The commander, observing the fleet from the bridge of the Resolute Dawn, reflected quietly on everything that had happened. The operation had been about more than rescue. It had been about proving something fundamental about humanity, that even in the vast, indifferent darkness of space, humans could bring light, hope, and protection where it was most needed. And the story of that light would echo for generations across planets, colonies, and the stars themselves. By the time the fleet returned to Earth orbit, celebrations began. Cities lit up with fireworks, and messages of welcome and gratitude flowed through communication channels. The children were escorted to the planet carefully, with every precaution taken for their comfort and safety. When they finally stepped onto solid ground, they were met by parents, families, and entire communities ready to embrace them. The moment was one of triumph, not of war, but of humanity's unyielding heart. Even after the mission ended, its impact continued to ripple across space. Other civilizations observed humanity's actions and began to rethink their perceptions. Humans were no longer seen as emotional and reckless. They were seen as a species capable of immense courage, moral clarity, and protective instinct. Stories of the mission spread to distant worlds, teaching others that even a young species could embody principles of justice and care in ways that reshaped the galaxy. For the children, the journey to recovery would take time, but each one knew something important. They were loved, they were safe, and humanity would always come for them if they were ever in danger. Their laughter gradually returned, filling homes, schools, and hospitals with life once more. And everywhere they went, the story of the fleet followed, a reminder that love and determination could travel across light years, overcome fear, and bring the most vulnerable safely home. The Valtari, now faced with the reality of their actions, began to rebuild their society with a new perspective. They had witnessed the power of human compassion, courage, and unity firsthand. Their leaders learned slowly that intelligence without empathy could lead to disaster, and that even the smallest beings, when protected with care, could inspire courage that shook entire star systems. Back on the human ships, the crews continued to perform their duties, but the mission remained with them. It had tested them, taught them, and reminded them of what it truly meant to be human. They had faced an advanced alien civilization, navigated unknown dangers, and brought hope to those who needed it most. And through it all, they had done what humans do best. They protected one another. Even years later, the rescue mission would be remembered not as a war story, but as a story of humanity's heart. Schools would teach it, Families would recount it, and children across the galaxy would know that no matter where humans were, they would always fight to protect their own. And in every human heart, the memory of that mission lived on, a constant reminder of courage, love, and the unbreakable bond that ties a species together when it matters most. It was a victory that needed no flags, no trophies, and no medals. The real triumph was in the safety of every child returned, in the tears of relief on parents' faces, and in the knowledge that humanity had proven to itself and the galaxy that protecting the innocent is the highest duty of all. And as the fleet settled back into orbit, the stars above shone a little brighter, reflecting the quiet pride of a species that had once again lived up to its promise, to never abandon its own. After the successful rescue of the human children, the fleet began its slow journey back home. Though the immediate danger had passed, the mission was far from over. Every officer, medic, and soldier aboard the ships carried the weight of what they had witnessed. The children, once terrified and lost, now began to show the first signs of relief and trust, but the trauma they had endured could not be erased overnight. The crew knew that their responsibility extended beyond just returning the children. They had to ensure these young lives were nurtured, healed, and reminded that the universe could still be a safe place. On the flagship, the commander walked quietly through the corridors. He stopped to watch a small group of children learning to speak again after weeks of silence. A medic gently encouraged them to talk, asking simple questions, and when the children answered, their voices were weak but filled with courage. The commander did not speak aloud, but he allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. He knew humanity's greatest victory was not the skillful navigation of enemy space or the strategic dismantling of alien defenses. It was bringing back those children intact and alive. Meanwhile, the fleet maintained constant communication with Earth and the outer colonies. Families waited anxiously, knowing that any delay in updates could cause panic. The communications officers transmitted reassuring messages. All children are safe. Medical teams are attending to every need. Recovery is underway. Even though the words were simple, they carried immense relief for parents across light years. People gathered around screens, tears streaming, hearts swelling with hope, and the entire human population seemed to breathe collectively. In the aftermath of the rescue, special teams were assigned to document everything. Engineers, medics, and security officers created detailed reports of the mission, not for fame, but to ensure that future generations would understand the courage, determination, and compassion that had made the operation successful. Every detail mattered. The careful planning, the precision strikes, the medical care, the attention to the emotional well-being of the children. These records would serve as a guide for how humanity approached challenges where lives were at stake. On the children's side, progress was steady but gradual. Some had nightmares in the quiet of their quarters. Others flinched at sudden noises, a remnant of their time in captivity. Human medics worked tirelessly, using both science and gentle care to help them regain trust in the world. Volunteers read stories aloud, taught songs, and shared meals with them, slowly creating a sense of normalcy. Even the smallest gestures, a warm touch, a kind word, a playful smile, helped repair the fractures in their young hearts. Back on Earth, the story of the rescue spread beyond news broadcasts. Writers, educators, and speakers told the tale, emphasizing not only the bravery of the fleet but also the importance of humanity's empathy. Schools across the colonies included the events in their lessons, teaching children the power of courage and compassion. Adults reflected on it as well, understanding that the mission had shown the galaxy what it truly meant to be human, not only in technology or strength but in moral commitment and love. In the Valtari system, the aftermath was equally profound. Citizens who had once followed their leaders blindly began questioning the morality of their actions. The Council had been forced to acknowledge that humans were not easily intimidated, and that their commitment to protecting the innocent was unparalleled. Younger Valtari leaders studied human behavior, trying to understand what had made them succeed where logic alone could not. Slowly, the society began to consider empathy as a factor in their decisions. Even though fear had initially driven their realization, the seed of understanding had been planted, and it would grow over time. Throughout the fleet, crew members shared stories of the mission quietly. In the spaces between duty, they spoke of the children they had helped, the courage they had witnessed, and the unexpected ways humanity's moral clarity had guided them. These stories built bonds among the crew, reinforcing the idea that their purpose was more than following orders. It was protecting life, hope, and the promise that no one would be left behind. As the ships neared human-controlled space, celebrations were prepared. Families, friends, and entire colonies planned to welcome the rescued children and the fleet. Messages of gratitude and hope poured in from every corner of humanity. Musicians, storytellers, and artists worked to capture the emotion of the event, creating songs, drawings, and plays about the bravery and determination displayed across the stars. The mission had not only saved lives, it had inspired an entire species to remember what it meant to care for one another. When the fleet finally returned to Earth orbit, the scene was one of joyous chaos. Families rushed forward to meet their children. Tears fell freely. Embraces lasted long, and laughter returned to those who had suffered the deepest fear. Medics carefully guided the children from the ships, ensuring that their return to home was smooth and safe. Volunteers offered blankets, food, and comfort, each gesture reinforcing the message that they were loved and protected. Even after the initial reunions, the human fleet continued its work. Teams traveled to the outer colonies, delivering rescued children to their families, providing care to those who needed extra support, and ensuring that every child received a chance to recover fully. The operation had become a moving lesson in humanity's commitment to life, safety, and hope. It reminded everyone that being human meant not only surviving, but actively protecting the vulnerable. In the weeks that followed, the fleet debriefed the mission thoroughly. Each officer reflected on what had gone right, what could have been improved, and what lessons should be carried into the future. They recognized that strength alone was not enough. It was the combination of strategy, empathy, and courage that had led to success. They understood that their actions had sent a clear message to the galaxy. Humanity fights not for conquest, but for protection, justice, and love. The rescued children began integrating back into their communities, and the ripple effect of the mission continued. Teachers, parents, and mentors focused on helping the children regain confidence and joy. The children started attending classes, playing in playgrounds, and learning new skills. Slowly, their laughter returned, bright and unrestrained. Their survival became a symbol of resilience for all humans, young and old, reminding everyone that courage and compassion could overcome even the darkest challenges. Even years later, the mission was remembered not as a simple rescue, but as a defining moment in human history. Stories were told, books were written, and documentaries captured the bravery, strategy, and heart that had saved the children. The mission became a symbol of the strength found in empathy, the power of unity, and the depth of human courage. It inspired generations to act with compassion, to stand up for the vulnerable, and to never hesitate when protecting what is right. The Valtari, too, were changed. Their society, once rigid and detached, began to see the importance of morality alongside logic. Their young leaders studied humanity's actions, realizing that intelligence alone was not enough. Empathy and understanding were equally vital. Slowly, lessons from the rescue spread through their world, creating the possibility that such cruelty would never happen again. As the fleet settled back into routine duties, every crew member carried the memory of the mission with them. It was a reminder of why they had chosen to serve humanity, not for glory, not for medals, but for the protection of life itself. They had seen fear and courage, despair and hope, and through it all, they had proven the truth of something deeper, that humanity's greatest power lies not in its weapons or technology, but in its heart. When the final reports were filed and the last children had returned to their homes, the commander stood once more on the bridge of the resolute dawn. The stars stretched endlessly ahead, and for the first time in weeks the quiet was not tense but peaceful. He reflected on the mission, on the children, on the fleet, and on humanity itself. The mission had been dangerous, emotional, and difficult, but it had reaffirmed what every human knew in their hearts. They fight for each other, and they never abandoned the innocent. Across Earth and the colonies, the story of the mission became legend. Children drew pictures of the fleet, teachers told tales of bravery, and parents recounted the importance of standing together in times of crisis. Even generations who had not been alive during the events learned of humanity's courage, understanding that love, determination, and the commitment to protect the vulnerable could change the course of history. The mission had been more than a rescue. It had been a testament to human spirit. Every child who returned safely, Every family reunited and every life saved became proof that even across the vast expanse of space, humanity could shine brighter than any star. And in every human heart, the memory of those days lived on as a reminder that courage and compassion, united, could overcome any darkness, reach across any distance, and bring the lost safely home. Humanity had faced a test unlike any other, and it had succeeded, not through fear, not through power, but through the quiet, unstoppable force of care, loyalty, and love. And as the stars stretched endlessly above the fleet and the returning children, one truth became undeniable. No matter where danger appeared, no matter how far across the universe, humanity would always come for its own.